Hello everyone, I'm Kamari and welcome back to the Tavern. Today we're going to be doing a little bit of a video essay on why I think modern games keep failing. We're going to be taking a look at a couple examples. This is going to be part one and what I'm going to be making a little bit of a series, at least 2 parts, possibly 3 or more, depending on how it does, and we'll kind of see where it goes from there. I don't want to take too long on the intro, so as always, if you do like it at the end, maybe think about giving the channel a subscribe. I do a lot of Hogwarts Legacy content and even more types of content coming soon. So without further ado, let's get into it. Today we're going to discuss why I believe many modern games keep failing. This obviously doesn't apply to every modern game. You do have the occasional success story like Elden Ring and Red Dead, etc., but it seems like we're seeing more and more modern games keep failing. First, let's define what failing means. To me, there are a couple of criteria that could qualify your game to meet the "My AAA I just spent millions of dollars on failed" award. Firstly, and most obviously, is low sales. If no one is buying your game, then it failed. Secondly, I would say if the game sold well with pre-orders but has a mixed or worse review on Steam or 6 out of 10 or less on user review websites. At that point, it more or less has also failed. Now you may think those are some pretty strict criteria, but I would disagree. I believe that if you spend anywhere from millions to tens of millions or even more on a project, and less than 60% of the people think it's good, then that's a failed project. If I spend more than 3 hours making a video and it only gets a 60% like ratio, then I would reflect on that and think that I must have failed somewhere in the video, unless it was maybe a very controversial topic. So let's get back on track here. What are the reasons we're seeing modern games fail? The first overarching reason is developer mentality. What I mean by that is what appears to be the modern developer mindset when creating and releasing video games. There are a few sub-reasons that go along with that, and we're going to get into that now. So firstly, modern developers seem to have adopted this logic that it's okay to release a game that's completely unfinished and buggy because they can patch it and fix it later. This mentality obviously comes from the internet and patching era. However, I feel like most developers fail to understand that if a player buys your game and it's not good, odds are it will be a very long time before they try it again, if they ever do. It's actually insane to think about how many games we've seen recently released in an unfinished state, just this year alone. I'm sure anyone watching this video can think of a recent game that they were very excited for, only for it to release and be painfully obvious that it wasn't ready. The second problem with this developer mentality is the lack of originality. This goes into 2 directions. The first is nostalgia bait. So many games now are trying to recapture the magic of a successful game that came before it. A decent example of this is the Callisto Protocol. The developers were clearly trying to recapture the magic of Dead Space, and to be fair, they were semi-close and they had some of the original developers of Dead Space. However, it really felt like they were just trying to copy something from the past, and I left feeling very uninspired by the gameplay. Another great example of this is all of the WoW clones, Diablo clones, Genshin Impact clones, and even now Vampire Survivor clones. These are all examples of a developer catching lightning in a bottle and releasing a great product. Afterward, other developers think that they can cash in on it just by changing very little about the game and releasing the same thing and expecting a similar result. This isn't to say that remakes or using older ideas can't work. Some of the greatest stories of all time come from back before, BC days. Some of the recent remakes have been fantastic games, but the main thing they have in common was that they changed enough about the fundamental game to capture the nostalgia while still giving the player a brand new experience. A few examples of this include the new Final Fantasy VII remake from a few years ago, all of the Resident Evil remakes we've been seeing, etc. The list goes on. The next part of this chapter on bad developer mentality brings us to political messaging. I know. We all knew this one was coming. Another big problem is developers using video games to push their own political ideologies and viewpoints onto players. It's turbo cringy, no one likes it, it never works, and the games usually bomb in sales and user reviews. Notice I'm saying user reviews here very specifically, because let's be honest, you really cannot just trust, quote, game journalists anymore. Seriously, I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, alt-right, alt-left, medium rare, well done, asexual, or a nematode. Please don't use video games to push your political agendas. That's what your Twitter page is for. That's what your YouTube channel is for. That's what your Facebook and 4chan profiles are for. Also, I feel like aside from about 20% of writers that are actually phenomenal in the gaming industries, most of these companies need to fire most of their writing staff because I've read better fan fiction than some of the writing in these newer games. So that wraps up chapter 1 of why modern games are failing. So let's move into chapter 2. At first, I was going to list this as another developer problem, but then I started thinking more about it. This probably isn't usually a developer problem, but more of an investor, CEO, corporate problem. See, back in my day... a game would come out on PS2 and that was it. Boom, done. There's your game. Want to be more powerful? Start grinding, buddy, or type in a cheat code. Want to beat it quicker? Get good. Want that super cool looking armor or costume? Unlock it. Again, or cheat codes. So obviously, the theme here is that we need to bring back cheat codes. Oh, no. I'm sorry, that's the wrong script. Oh, here it is. The theme here is microtransactions. The biggest problems with microtransactions is that they fundamentally destroy any sense of achievement that comes from accomplishments in the game. Just knowing that someone else can just buy the same thing instantly, it actually messes with a player's psyche. Believe it or not, this is actually worse for the game than the player. I can give a perfect example. I think Lost Ark has the best isometric ARPG combat of any game ever, hands down, not even close a little bit. However, I can't play it more than about 15 minutes at a time because my time just feels so wasted. I feel torn between wanting to have fun with the game and knowing that the game is not really designed to be played by me. It's designed for me to pay enough to get to the point where I can play the fun bit. Any game that allows you to buy power almost always devolves into a game that is designed to keep you from having fun until you've been properly milked for your money. The kicker here is that it's not even the biggest problem. The biggest problem is that these games are almost always live service games that repeat this cycle every 6 months. They release new content, but gate you from completing or competing in that content in every way possible with a financial gate on every activity. Whether it's through time gating, limiting what content you have access to, limiting what your character can buy or sell in a game's economy, the list goes on and on. These games turn the players into money vending machines that they can cash out every 6 months before their big investor meetings. I can already hear some of you saying it, but Kamari, my favorite company needs microtransactions to make money, or else they can't make more games. No, that is the lie you have been fed by these same companies. Of course they're going to tell you that. They don't need it, and I can give you a perfect example as to why. Grand Theft Auto 5 is one of the most expensive games ever made. It cost roughly $265 million to make Grand Theft Auto 5. Now that's a lot of money, right? Well, considering in box sales alone, the game has made $6 billion. Yeah, $6 billion in box sales alone. I'd say that 265 million isn't very much anymore, is it? So explain to me then, why does Grand Theft Auto 5 have online microtransactions? They're still making money on box sales and digital sales to this day. The answer is actually simple when you look at it from a producer-consumer standpoint. People keep buying them. Now, of course, not every game is going to sell like Grand Theft Auto 5. However, if you're not developing a game to make a profit off the box sale, then essentially your whole business model is to make more money off players through microtransactions. In a free-to-play game, that's fine. That is okay. That is not a bad business strategy to have. You're giving a product out for free that people can have fun with, and you do need some money in return. I understand it. But in a game that you're already making tens to hundreds of millions of dollars off players, I don't see that as being a good thing. I really wish people understood how badly they are shooting themselves in the foot every time they buy one of these. Every microtransaction that is sold guarantees that the next game in the series or patch in the game will be less balanced than the current one. You are telling the investors that you don't mind how badly the game is tuned as long as you can buy your way out of it. The company actually now has a profit incentive to tune the game poorly. And if you think that doesn't apply to cosmetics, you're giving them a profit incentive to keep the best looking stuff in the game away from you and behind a paywall. Which goes back to my point. These games will devolve into being developed for you to have to pay enough money for the game to be fun again. Now let's get into chapter 3. Many modern games feel like they have way too much going on. Think back to the last open world game you played. You probably open your map and immediately there's 500 markers scattered on your screen. Collect some plants here. Go capture this outpost. Do this skill challenge. Here's a side quest. Here's the main quest. Here's a lookout tower. Here's another lookout tower. Here's some more plants. Now multiply the 8 things I just said by 30, and that's about the minimum amount of objectives you'll have actively tracked all at the same time on one map in most open world games. It completely kills any feeling of exploration for the game. You never just stumble across cool stuff anymore. Everything is force-fed down your throat, and it starts to feel more like a GPS simulator than a game. If you need any more proof that this is actually a really bad design philosophy and developers need to step away from it, just take a look at, I don't know, maybe the best-selling open world game of 2022 that also just happened to win Game of the Year. Yeah, you guessed it, Elden Ring. Your map basically shows you nothing. Everything must be found by you, and even then it doesn't mark things after you found them other than the fast travel locations. This creates an interesting interaction where the player actually remembers more about the map and where things are than they ever would have in a game with 1,000 map markers. It's like how your dad or your grandpa could go all the way across the country without ever looking at a map or a GPS. Because the first time he did it, the first 10 times he did it, he had to figure it out on his own without any help, so his brain actually stores and remembers that information. This kind of design gives players an actual attachment to the world as if it was its own character. Long story short, the more tracking you have on your map, the less attached the player is going to feel to it. Another big issue that I think many modern games have is just having way too many systems without any depth at all. Let me pose a question to you. Would you rather have 100 puddles in your yard that wouldn't even get water inside your shoe if you stepped in it, or a pool that you could go swimming in anytime you wanted? Personally, I'd take the pool, but so often developers give us nothing but puddles, shallow systems with zero depth. Going back to the last open world game you played again, it probably had a loot system with like 1 to 3 stats on the gear. You could probably upgrade your gear. It probably had some sort of mount system, and then you could probably hold X to upgrade your mount after you gathered some specific item off of a boss or something. A crafting system that was kind of bare minimum. Oh, and don't forget to upgrade your bag for materials, so you'll need to find a certain fiber that can be found out in the world, and then you'll hold X to upgrade your bag, and now it has more spots. Maybe a hunting system where you can get a little bit of skin that probably upgrades that material bag. Maybe some kind of baseline character stat system that you could do something with when you leveled up. You could probably collect some kind of skill point or equivalent out in the open world. You get the point. In most, not all, but most games, these systems are skin deep and there's no choice or complexity. I'd rather have a game that only has a couple of systems that are fleshed out really well and feel really impactful. I don't care that I gathered enough fiber to hold down a button to upgrade a bag. It's not interesting, it's not fun, I don't care. It feels more like a chore than gameplay. Everyone should know by this point I will not make it through an entire video like this without bringing up Knights of the Old Republic. If you've played that game, think about that leveling up experience. You would put serious thought into that every time you leveled up. Do I want charisma, or do I want better healing, or maybe better tech so I don't have to use as many computer spikes when hacking into systems? There was a whole ability system that allowed you to really play with and fine-tune your own build for every party member, not even just your main character. Every party member could be fine-tuned to be exactly the character you were trying to get them to be. That was a system that you felt throughout your entire playthrough. Ever get to one of those minefields and you realize no one in your party can disarm mines? I hope you spec'd into healing because you're gonna need it. Or when the opposite happens and you come up on a minefield and you can disarm every mine there, and now you have like 30 mines chilling in your bag for the next boss or hard encounter. That is a good system. Sometimes you feel the consequences of not choosing something that you could have, but you also feel the rewards for the choices you did make. It adds complexity, it adds impact to the choices. Long story short, developers, please stop adding mindless systems into games just for the sake of having them. It feels more like you're going down a checklist and adding everything that you can put on the back of your box to sell it, rather than wanting your systems to actually be able to do something awesome. The last part of this chapter is just busy work. I won't go too in depth on this here because we all know what I'm talking about. A great example, as good of a game as it was, the Spider-Man game on PS4 and collecting the birds around the city or whatever it was. You know, it's funny, the show The Amazing World of Gumball did an episode where the main character is trapped inside a game and it encapsulates this idea perfectly. In fact, you know what? Here's the clip.
Hello, I've lost my pigeons. Will you help me find them?
No! A super tedious side quest that preys on every gamer's weakness!
Tortilla chips and sugary drinks.
No!
The sun?
No! The compulsive need to complete every game to 100%.
Yeah, that. Just stop it. It's just like systems. If you're going to put it in the game, give it some sort of meaning. Not just a reward or whatever, but make it feel like there's some reason for me to be doing this, whether it's narratively or otherwise. Make it feel impactful. Make it feel like I should be doing this. So that's going to wrap up part 1 of this series on why modern games keep failing. So let's head back to the tavern. Hey guys, thank you so much for sticking through and watching this whole video. If you're still watching at this point, thank you so much. I'm super excited. Hogwarts Legacy is coming out now in less than 2 weeks. We're going to be streaming the game either right here or on Twitch. I haven't completely made up my mind yet, but I will definitely let you know. If you like these video essays, I will definitely be doing more of them, as well as a part 2 to this one. So feel free to subscribe or like or stick around for that. And if it's already out, then go ahead and watch part 2. If not, I also do a lot of Hogwarts Legacy content. I'm going to be doing a lot of content on that game once it comes out about lore, quest lines, and everything. So if that's something you're interested in, maybe subscribe. Or if you have another game that you kind of like my style, but you have a different game you're looking forward to, let me know and I'd love to cover it. I'd love to get into it and get obsessed with it right there with you. So as always, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me here at the tavern and have a great week.